The world stage just got a little more crowded with a whole bunch of new emerging countries that are delivering stellar growth. So how does that affect the old economic order and the old way of doing business? Patricia Hewitt is chair of the UK-India Business Council and former Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, United Kingdom. Simple question. As the world stage gets crowded, does it make your job as chair of the UK-India Business Council a shade tougher simply because India could be preoccupied or have its attention divided between the United Kingdom, the European Union, the US, and many other new emerging countries that bring great value to India as a trade partner, as a partner?
Look, in one sense, you're absolutely right. The whole world is coming to India. The whole world wants to trade with India and invest in India and talk to India. So I think we in Britain just have to work harder. And that's no bad thing, particularly given our historic relationship. I think in the past there's maybe been a tendency for some policymakers or even business people in Britain to think, almost to take the relationship for granted because it is so close. And we have such a big Indian diaspora in Britain, hugely successful in their own right. But what I would also say is, first of all, India's growth and the growth of all these other re-emerging and new economies is wonderful news. It's wonderful news morally, in the sense that people who've been condemned to poverty now have a chance of a better life. But it's also very good news economically, because we can grow the whole of the world economy. And that's going to be good for Britain and the developed world, and even better for the countries that are growing. And then, having said that, let's remember that Britain is one of the top foreign direct investors in India, and from outside the European Union, India is one of the top investors in Britain. Indeed, Tata is Britain's largest manufacturing employer. So I think the relationship's a healthy one, but there is so much more we can do together, which is why our own work is so important.
I'm going to take a step back and really question the assumption that there is a new constellation of growth. To what extent do you agree with this statement that there is, and it's a mouthful, a new constellation of growth, and we're talking about a pretty disparate bunch of emerging countries with particular issues, etc. Do you buy that whole theory of a new constellation?
I do, and I buy the metaphor, because if we think about a constellation of stars, it's a complex system, it's a network of a whole bunch of different, I'm not an astronomer, but the stars are all, if you like, different shapes, different sizes, different ages, and yet there is a pattern, if you like. And I think that's true of the re-emerging economies, the new economies of the world, and just the fact that they are the new growth centres of a world, and that this will be a multipolar world. The point was being made in our discussions this afternoon that the old pattern was for one country to take over from another country as the engine of growth in the world economy. It was the United Kingdom a few centuries ago, then it was the United States. But now it is going to be many countries driving growth, certainly the United States, but China, India, Japan, many others, Europe as a whole, and Europe will return to growth as well. So that notion of a constellation actually seems to be very apt.
One of the impacts is that a number of these countries are pursuing bilateral trade agreements, regional trade agreements, and as they do that more and more aggressively and in a more widespread way, it diminishes or seems to diminish the role of the WTO and the Doha talks. Are we just heading towards a natural death, if you can call it that, of the Doha talks?
I led the British trade delegation to Doha, and that was very shortly after 9/11. So it was a very emotional time in world politics. And there was huge hope when we launched the Doha Development Round that we really could do something that would transform global growth and the prospects especially for the new economies. Those hopes have been very sorely disappointed, and there's no doubt at all this web of regional and bilateral trade agreements to some extent is taking the place. Now, I think those bilateral and those regional agreements are going to be very important. I hope pretty soon we can reach agreement between the European Union and India on a comprehensive trade agreement. And that will also help spur growth. If we had been able to do the Doha round, it would have spurred growth even faster. But I don't think that means the death of the WTO itself, the World Trade Organization itself, partly because the WTO is so important in dealing with disputes between member states, including disputes between China and the USA. And so they've got an interest, all those member states, in actually keeping the WTO alive and functioning. And I also think there is a chance, if governments are willing to seize it, within the original Doha agenda, which was enormous, to take one part of it, not so controversial, which is trade facilitation, and do something at a global level to get rid of some of the bureaucracy, the customs bureaucracy, that is getting in the way of world trade. People calculate that could deliver a $40 billion boost to the global economy. Almost all of it would come to India and the other re-emerging economies.
And that's not controversial. Well, let's hope that
it's less controversial.
Less controversial. Well, let's
Less
hope that the WTO is able to put that together. Patricia Hewitt, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.